welcome to The Deep Dive. You're tuning in because, well, you want to get up to speed quickly on important topics, but without wading through tons of info.
And you want it structured, clear, engaging.
Exactly. Today, we're diving into the story of Young King Hair Care.
Ah, yes, the grooming products for young men of color.
Precisely. And this isn't your typical success story. We're actually starting with a pretty significant public setback.
Right, and then looking at how they really turn things around, a key pivot moment.
Yeah, we're drawing on a really detailed analysis of the company for this.
So, Young King Hair Care, founded December 2019 by Cora and Stefan Miller.
And the whole thing kicked off because of something really personal, didn't it?
It really did. Their son, Cade, born back in January 2017, he had this full head of textured hair right from the start.
And they hit a wall trying to find products.
Totally. They just couldn't find, clean, natural, plant-based stuff specifically for boys of color. We're talking 3A to 4C hair types.
That's a specific gap.
It is. And Cora Miller, apparently she spent 2 whole years searching beauty aisles, getting more and more frustrated, lack of products, lack of representation.
So it wasn't just seeing a gap, it was living it. Okay, so they had the personal motivation. But they did their homework too, right? Cora's background is corporate social responsibility.
Yeah, CSR and Stefan's marketing. So they had this complementary skill set. They actually went out and talked to, I think, over 100 parents.
Wow. Okay, so they validated the need.
Definitely. Then, December 2019, they launched. Direct-to-consumer, DTC, based in Atlanta.
And their mission wasn't small. It was redefining male grooming for the next generation.
Right. It was bigger than just products. It was about showing Black boys, young men, in this unapologetic, dynamic, and expressive way.
Connecting grooming to self-care, confidence, self-love. That's powerful branding, especially with their backgrounds.
Absolutely. Cora's CSR experience probably helped nail that social purpose, and Stefan's marketing skills, well, essential for getting that message out.
Okay, let's jump forward a bit. Shark Tank. A moment many founders dream of, but maybe dread too.
Yeah. March 2022, season 13, they walk in asking for $225,000.
For just 2.5% equity, which, doing the math, implies a pretty hefty $9 million pre-money valuation.
Bold ask. And they backed it up somewhat with impressive sales figures, $1.54 million year to date at that point.
Sounds great on the surface, but the sharks, they weren't biting, were they? What was the main issue?
Profitability, or rather the lack of it. Those big sales numbers are great, but the sharks, they zero in on the bottom line.
Right, that's the classic growth versus profit dilemma. Were they just burning too much cash to grow that fast?
That seemed to be the concern. It raises questions about cost structure, pricing, maybe operational efficiency. Investors get worried.
So did they get any offers at all?
They did, yeah. 2 offers, but both involved royalties. Kevin O'Leary offered the $225K, but wanted $1 royalty per unit until he got his money back, then 50 cents forever.
Oof, in perpetuity. Tough. And Robert Herjavec?
Similar structure. $225K, but for a 50-cent royalty per unit until he doubled his money, so $450 recouped. And he wanted 5% equity if they exited.
Okay, so offers on the table. But Cora and Stefan, they walked away.
They turned both down.
Yeah.
And their reasoning was pretty clear. Cash flow.
Royalties eat directly into that, don't they? Especially when you're trying to reinvest every penny into growth.
Exactly. Taking money off the top of every sale, it just wasn't going to work for their growth plans. They seemed very protective of their equity and their long-term vision. They needed capital, yes, but not on those terms.
So they leave Shark Tank with no deal. National television. That could feel like a public failure.
For many, it would be a massive blow. But here's where their story gets really interesting. We need to rewind slightly. They launched DTC, right? End of 2019.
And initially they were relying on in-person events, pop-ups, things like that.
Yeah, boots on the ground stuff. And then 2020 happened.
COVID.
Right.
That must have just decimated their initial strategy.
Completely.
Right.
Suddenly, no in-person events. They were forced, absolutely forced, to pivot.
To digital, obviously.
Had to be. Influencers, social media, building that online community. It wasn't just a tweak. It was a fundamental shift in how they reached customers.
And did it work?
Amazingly well, actually. Their sales in the second half of 2020 jumped. Get this. 394% compared to the first half.
Wow, 394%. That's huge.
Massive. And 94% of those sales were from new customers. So the digital pivot wasn't just survival. It was rocket fuel.
Okay, so the pandemic forced a successful pivot. But there was something else in 2020, wasn't there? An accelerator program.
Yes, the Target Takeoff Beauty Accelerator. That was huge for them.
Why are programs like that so significant for a young brand?
Well, they offer incredible mentorship, deep dives into retail logistics, networking, basically an inside track on how big retail works. For a small brand, that kind of access and knowledge is invaluable.
So they get this great experience, learn a lot.
But here's the kicker. Target actually came to them after the program finished.
Wait, after the program, not as part of it.
Exactly. Target approached them, and that led to getting Young King hair care products not just on Target.com, but in the physical stores too.
That's incredible, especially considering this is after the Shark Tank rejection. Talk about validation.
It's a massive turning point. No deal on TV, then you land Target. It shows the underlying strength of the brand and the market need.
And the retail expansion didn't stop there, did it?
Nope. They got into Walmart soon after. By mid-2022, they were in, 1,200 to 1,500 combined Target and Walmart locations, plus Amazon.
They really scaled that retail presence quickly. And what about funding? Did the Shark Tank tournament hurt them there?
Apparently not. Around the time the Shark Tank episode actually aired, so early 2022, they closed a $1.6 million seed funding round.
Okay, so other investors definitely saw the potential the Sharks missed, or at least weren't comfortable with at that valuation.
Seems like it. And notably, the New Voices Fund was one of the key investors. They specifically backed businesses led by women of color.
So the Target deal likely helped build that investor confidence post-Shark Tank.
You'd have to assume so. Landing a major retailer like Target is a huge proof point. It shows market demand, operational capability. It de-risks the investment significantly.
Makes sense. Let's talk about the products themselves, what makes them stand out.
Well, the core philosophy is plant-based, natural ingredients, things like shea butter, marshmallow root, and they're very clear about being free from sulfates, parabens, the usual suspects.
And specifically formulated for that 3A4C textured hair, right?
Absolutely. They even worked with a black female chemist and did focus groups with young boys. So real intention behind the formulations, not just slapping a label on generic stuff.
Getting it right for the target user.
Which builds loyalty, when
Yeah.
a product actually works for a specific hair type that's often ignored.
And they've expanded beyond those first 3 styling products.
Oh yeah. They've got the Crown Wash set now, shampoo and conditioner. Though, worth noting, the shampoo has honey, and I think the pomade has beeswax, so not strictly vegan across the board.
Good clarification. What else?
They moved into skincare too, cleanser, toner, serum, moisturizer, and launched a specific collection, the LOCDIN line, for locks, braids, and twists, plus mousse and pomade.
They really built out that ecosystem.
Yeah.
And wasn't there a big collaboration?
Yes. The Black Panther connection. Late 2022, they did a limited edition collab with Marvel Studios for Wakanda Forever.
Smart move. Talk
Yeah.
about cultural relevance and visibility.
Absolutely brilliant. Used African oils like baobab and marula in those products too. It just perfectly aligned with their brand, their mission of representation.
Yeah.
Huge amplifier.
So looking at where they are now, competitively speaking, they've really carved out this niche, haven't they? Young, multicultural males.
Definitely. It was an underserved market, and they addressed it directly with a mission-driven brand that goes beyond just the product function. It's about confidence, identity.
What are the risks or challenges looking ahead, though? Can't all be smooth sailing.
Well, access to capital is often a bigger hurdle for Black-owned businesses. That's a systemic issue. They've historically operated lean, maybe 4 to 10 employees listed, so managing scale is always a challenge.
And profitability. Was that Shark Tank concern ever resolved?
The analysis we looked at pointed to that historical lack of profitability during their high-growth phase as a financial risk. And of course, as you succeed, competition notices. Others might try to enter that niche.
True. But securing Target, Walmart, Amazon, plus that seed funding, it's a strong position despite those challenges.
It really is. It shows what's possible when you have a clear vision, understand your customer deeply, and execute well, even when facing hurdles.
So wrapping this up, the key takeaways here. Young King Hair Care's journey is really one of resilience, wouldn't you say?
Definitely resilience and strategic adaptation. That Shark Tank rejection could have sunk them, but it didn't.
Instead, the forced pivot during the pandemic, that accelerator program, those became the catalysts.
Yeah, leading to the major retail wins and the funding. They found a different path, arguably a better one for them long term.
It's a raw story, building something after a public knockback, finding momentum by serving an audience others overlooked.
And that's maybe the core lesson. Setbacks happen. public ones, private ones, but they don't have to be the end. Learning, adapting, pivoting is key.
Absolutely. For any of you listening who might be founders, maybe feeling underestimated, this story is potent. That pitch-sucked moment, real or perceived, doesn't define the future.
Sometimes that no just forces you to find a more creative, maybe more powerful, yes, somewhere else.
Which leads us to a final thought for you to chew on. Think about your own journey, your own projects. Have there been moments that felt like failures, like negative feedback that stung?
Could those moments actually contain the seeds of your next big opportunity? Could that perceived setback actually be nudging you towards a pivot, a change in direction that might lead to something even greater down the road? Something to consider.